Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Canadian Workshop. Today it's minus 34 degrees Celsius outside, and it's way too cold for me to be working out there. Even with the heaters off my garage, it's still too cold. So today what I decided to do is bring you guys inside and show you how we modify a do-it jig mold to go from a standard ball head jig like this one here to an underspin jig like this one. These underspin jigs are great for either ice fishing or summer fishing. Just a great all-around lure, and they work really, really well. And it's a quick and easy way to modify your mold to be able to make them. So I'll get set up and we'll get going. So what you're going to need to modify these do-it molds, obviously the first thing is the mold itself. Today I'm going to be modifying a 3/8 and ½ ounce mold. We do have one that we modified already for the 1/4 ounce, and we've been having a lot of requests for 3/8 and ½ ounce underspin jigs. So we're going to modify this mold today. You're going to need a rotary tool. Now I've got a toolkit here that has a handheld accessory, which makes it really, really easy to handle the Dremel tool and gives you more precise control of the Dremel tool. I could show this to you later when I get it set up. Also, what you're going to need is a fine point Sharpie. You're going to need some jigs that you precast to fit the cavities that you're going to be working with. In my case, it's a 3/8 and ½ ounce jig. And you're also going to need these swivels that you're going to be using with your underspin jigs. I use a number 7 swivel. I find it works well. It's not too big. It spins nice and freely. So these work quite well here. So I'll get my my Dremel tool set up and I'll show you that. Okay, so we're pretty well set up now. This Dremel tool kit that I have comes with a long hose that connects to the end of the Dremel tool, and there's a connection there. It connects into it and it allows you to hang the Dremel tool and use this kind of like a pencil in order to be able to do your work without having to hold the big tool itself. So it's a lot better. The bits that I like to use when modifying these molds are these ones here. There's a like a triangular fine point bit, and then you have one that has more of a flat end, and you'll see why I need that one later. And also a round ball bit for my Dremel tool. So those are the three that I use that works well, that have worked well for us in the past. So this is my mold here, and what you want to do first is, like I mentioned, we needed a jig that fits snugly, that's been cast already. These just happen to be painted, they don't have to be painted. And these fit into the molds, and I'll place them in the right sockets. So now we have my ½ ounce jig and 3/8 jig placed in the mold here. And what you want to do is you want to figure out roughly where you want your swivel to come out of the jig. And what we can see here on these ones is I have the swivel coming more of a downward angle. If you have it coming out too straight out the jig, well then it's not going to allow your blade to swivel, because the blade's going to be sitting at a perpendicular angle to that swivel. So you want it to be somewhat in line but not straight down. So I figure around a 30 to 45 degree gives you a good angle in order to be able to allow the blade to spin properly without binding. So what I like to do with these is use the Sharpie and figure out roughly where you want, well, roughly precisely where you want the swivel to be hanging out. You don't want it to stick out at a let's see if I can get a better angle there. So you don't want it to stick out at a 90 degree from the jig. You'd want it to stick out more at a 45 degree angle. And the reason I'm using the Sharpie here is because we want both sides of the mold to be exactly the same. You don't want a groove cut on here on this half of the mold, and the other half of the mold the groove is up higher. So what you want to do is you want to mark a spot, I'd say right about there, and mark a spot on the jig and on the mold, and that'll give you a reference for this side. And then having a line on the jig will also give you a reference for when we put it in the other side of the mold. And I'll do the same thing here. And I know I don't want it a 90, I want it about a 45, so we'll have it sitting here. So now what we could do is we can take that jig, sit it in the other half of the mold, and then we'll have an exact reference as to where it needs to be. So I'll go ahead and I'll mark those up. So I can see here I have the mark on the jig head from where I cut it where I marked it on the mold on the other side. So we'll do the same thing here. Put a mark on the mold here, and we can see again on this other jig, you can see the mark that we placed there. So we'll put a mark here on the mold. And now we know that those spots are identical from one half of the mold to the other. Okay, so once we have our reference points marked on the mold, what I like to do is I like to draw a line to identify the angle that we're going to have the swivel sitting in the mold, because we have the point at which the swivel is going to enter the mold, but we want to have a reference line, so we cut out a groove or a recess for the swivel equally on both halves of the mold. So what I like to do is I like to align the mark that we made earlier from the jig and the top of the sprue on the mold and put a line here. So what that'll do is that'll give me a line on this side, this half of the mold, and it'll be the same on the other side when I reference that the sprue opening, because they're exactly the same. So I could do the same here on the 3/8 recess, the 3/8 jig hole there. So I'll go ahead and do that on the other side. I've gone ahead and marked the other side as well, and I realize it's a little bit harder to see from where the angle was earlier, but now you can see here that there's we've got the line marked right here where it goes into the cavity, and I drew a line straight across in line with the entrance here, the sprue. So we did that there, and we did it right here. It's a little hard to see on camera, but it's there. So in line with the sprue hole and with that mark we made, and that's where the swivel is going to sit right here. So we got to cut out a groove to allow the swivel to sit in there and allow the mold to close. For the first step to cutting this out, all I want to do is I'm going to use the triangular bit here that has the fine point. I'm just going to use that fine point and just cut out the line a little bit, just so we have a good reference and a good starting point. So I'll use this sharp bit and I'll just run along that line carefully. So when you're starting your first cut in your mold here, you want to make sure that you don't go all the way into the jig cavity itself. You can see there I've left a little bit of material. You want to wait, and we'll pierce through at the very last step. So we want to make sure that we don't make an opening that's too large. You want to have it just snug to the swivel, because if it's not tight to the swivel, what you're going to have is you're going to wind up with a bunch of lead pouring out around your swivel, and you're going to have a lot of cleanup to do later on. So once I have my first initial groove cut, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to my ball head my ball head cutter, which is this one here. We're going to move to the ball cutter, and we're going to cut out the center part where the big part of the swivel sits. So what you want to do is take your swivel, and we'll start with this one. You want to set it in the mold just to get an idea of where that the large part of the swivel is going to sit. And in my case with this swivel here, it's almost right at the edge of the hole. So what we're going to do is we're going to start widening that line until the swivel is able to sit in there properly. So you're going to want to check every once in a while, make sure that you're not getting in there too deep. You want the swivel to sit inside the cavity nicely, and you only need to gouge out half of the thickness of the swivel on each side. So what we're going to do is I'm going to finish this side up. So just cut a groove for the size of the swivel just to sit in there, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've cleaned that up a bit. I put in the swivel for the first time and closed the mold tight, and you can see now I've got two lines here where the you can see at the end here I have two lines where the eye of the swivel was in the mold. So that gives me an idea of where to cut the small groove to allow the mold to close properly with the swivel in there. But you can see the cavity has been cleaned out, and the edge right by the head of the jig is square inside the cavity, so that'll allow the swivel to sit in there properly, and it'll allow us to pour the lead in there. So to cut that groove, I switch back to my triangular bit here with a very, very fine tip. And I'm just going to have my Dremel tool on low, and just very carefully just take out just a little bit here, just barely enough for the swivel to sit in there and to allow the mold to close completely. Again, I'm not going to take out everything that I need, because I know once the mold gets hot, the first time I close it on there with it hot, it's gonna make an indent for the wire for the eye, and it's gonna give me the exact spacing that I need for it. So there you go. I've cut out the groove with that fine point for where the eye goes from the groove we just made into the cavity for the jig head, and it fits nice and snug in there. It's not loose, because I know, like mentioned, once it's hot, you close it, it'll seal. It'll make the dent the size that it needs. So now I can put that in there. I can close my mold, and there's a small gap, but once I heat it up for the first time and squeeze it down, that gap will close and it'll make a perfect fit, and there won't be any excess lead leaking out the side. So that's it. It's just that easy. I mean, you do take a risk that you're going to wreck your mold, but I mean, the molds are $50. It's not that bad. I think it's worth the risk, and it's fun too. You get to make some custom lures, something a little bit different that's maybe not available out there. So I did it and turned out well this time. Maybe not next time, I don't know. But yeah, that's how it's done. So thanks a lot for taking the time to watch my videos. I really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of any of my upcoming videos. So thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.